Welcome back to our channel. In this video, we reveal some of the most valuable coins in the world, coins that collectors and investors are willing to pay thousands or even millions for.
There's a quiet sound most people ignore every single day. The sound of coins clinking in a jar, rattling in a glove compartment, or sitting forgotten in an old box in a garage. But what if one of those pennies, just one, could be worth more than a luxury home? Not someday in a fantasy world. Right now, in today's market. Because hidden in plain sight is one of the most talked about modern Lincoln cents in numismatic circles. The 2009 mint mark Lincoln penny with a rare error variation that has sparked intense debate, collector frenzy, and headlines suggesting values that reach astonishing heights in rare condition scenarios. And before you dismiss this as just another penny story, stay with me. Because people who ignored coins like this before are the same people who later discovered they had unknowingly spent something extraordinary. Now imagine that for a second. You, standing at a counter, handing over a penny that might have been worth more than your car. That thought alone is enough to make anyone pause. And yes, today we are diving deep into what makes this coin so sought after, why collectors are aggressively watching it, and why some high-grade or error-verified versions have been associated with extremely high valuation claims in niche auctions and private sales discussions. Let's begin. Act 1. The discovery that changes everything. It starts in 2009, a year already famous among coin collectors because of the Lincoln Bicentennial Series, a special redesign celebrating 200 years since Abraham Lincoln's birth. Four different reverse designs were released that year, making it one of the most unique penny years in modern U.S. mint history. Most people remember it as just another penny, but collectors? They remember it as a year full of surprises. Now here's where things get interesting. Among the millions minted at the Denver Mint, marked with the small d, certain pennies began to surface that didn't quite behave like normal coins. Subtle differences, strange characteristics, and in rare cases, noticeable minting anomalies that spark curiosity. At first, people shrugged it off, because who looks twice at a penny? But then something changed. Coin experts began noticing that specific 2009 Lincoln pennies, especially those with unusual die states, doubled features, or misstrike errors, were showing up in collector circles with rapidly increasing demand. And here's the emotional trigger most people miss. Scarcity doesn't need to be obvious to be valuable. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. Now imagine this. You're sorting through change at home, maybe even listening to this video in the background, and you casually flip over a penny that looks normal. But what if it isn't? Quick question, and be honest. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny closely? Exactly. Most people don't. And that is where opportunity quietly lives. Act 2. The rarity, the hype, and the obsession. Now let's talk about why this coin has gained so much attention. The 2009 Lincoln pennies are not rare in general circulation. Millions exist. But here's the twist that changes everything. Specific error varieties and high-grade, preserved specimens behave completely differently in the collector market. We're talking about coins that show distinctive minting errors, such as double die features, off-center strikes, die cracks, or unusual surface anomalies that distinguish them from standard circulation strikes. And in numismatics, even a tiny deviation can shift value dramatically. Some certified high-grade or rare error examples have been discussed in collector communities and auction listings with valuations that reach into the thousands, and in extremely limited, verified cases tied to exceptional rarity and demand dynamics. Even higher speculative figures have circulated in the market narrative. Now before your mind jumps ahead, no, not every 2009 penny is valuable. That would be like saying every old car is a Ferrari. But here's the part that creates urgency. Most people don't know what to look for. And that ignorance is exactly what keeps rare coins moving through everyday circulation unnoticed. Let that sink in. A coin worth potentially life-changing money could still be sitting inside a coffee shop cash register right now, or in your pocket, or in an old jar you haven't touched in years. And here's a pattern interrupt for you. If pennies were boring, why do billionaires collect them? It's not about the coin. It's about the story behind the coin. And the 2009 Lincoln series carries one of the most interesting modern stories in U.S. minting history. Collectors are not just buying metal. They are buying rarity, history, and verification. And when those three align, demand rises fast. Very fast. Act 3. What this means for you right now. So where does this leave you? Not in confusion, not in overwhelm, but in awareness. Because here is the truth most people never hear clearly enough. Value in coin collecting is not random. It is identified, and identification is a skill. If you have old pennies at home, especially from 2009, especially with a D mint mark, the first step is not to assume value. It is to observe. Look closely at the coin's condition. The sharper the detail, the better the preservation. Look for unusual markings, doubling, or anything that breaks the normal appearance of a standard penny. And most importantly, if something feels different, it is worth a second look from a certified coin expert or grading service. Because in this world, professional authentication is everything. Now here comes the emotional truth. Most life-changing discoveries in coin collecting don't happen in auctions. They happen at home, quietly, unexpectedly, and often by people who weren't even looking for them. That's the part that makes this so powerful. Because wealth isn't just about finding something valuable. It's about knowing what to do when you do. And here's your final moment of reflection. Right now, somewhere in your home, there may be coins that haven't been checked in years. And statistically speaking, most people will never look. But a small percentage will. And that small percentage is often where opportunity lives. So the question isn't whether these coins exist. The question is whether you will take a closer look. Because sometimes the difference between an ordinary day and a life-changing discovery is simply paying attention to what everyone else ignores. And if you've made it this far, you already think differently than most, which means you're already ahead of the crowd. The only thing left now is to start looking. In today's world of hidden wealth and forgotten treasures, some of the most ordinary-looking objects are quietly sitting in drawers, jars, and old coin collections, waiting to change someone's life overnight. What if a single penny, one you might have ignored for decades, was actually worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? And what if that penny was already in circulation right now, passing through hands without anyone realizing its true value? Before you dismiss this as another internet rumor, stay with me. Because what you are about to learn about the 2006 Lincoln Memorial penny with potential minting errors is something collectors, dealers, and serious investors are actively watching. And yes, there are claims in the rare coin market placing certain error examples at astonishing valuations, some even reaching into the high six-figure range under extreme conditions. But the real question is not just what it's worth, it's whether you could recognize it in time. Now imagine this. A quiet morning, you're sorting through an old jar of change. Pennies clink against the glass. Nothing special, just loose coins, maybe decades of accumulation. You're about to move on, but something makes you pause. One coin looks slightly different. The strike is unusual. The surface has a subtle doubling effect. It feels ordinary, yet somehow not quite right. That moment, that hesitation, could be the difference between a cent and a life-changing discovery. This is exactly how Act 1 of this story begins. Not with excitement, but with ignorance. Most people walk past their fortune every single day without realizing it. The 2006 Lincoln penny is a perfect example of this hidden world. Minted in Denver, billions were produced. On the surface, it seems like the least likely candidate for value. And yet, within that massive production run, rare mint errors can occur, doubling, misstrikes, off-center impressions, and die variations that turn an ordinary coin into something collectors aggressively hunt for. And here's where it gets interesting, because this is where fear quietly enters the picture. What if you already had one and spent it? What if it passed through your hands at a grocery store, a gas station, or a coffee shop, and you never noticed? That thought alone has made countless collectors double back through years of forgotten change jars, old piggy banks, and inherited coin stashes. Because in the world of numismatics, missing a rare error coin is not just a mistake. It could be a missed financial breakthrough. Now let's shift into Act 2. where curiosity turns into urgency and attention becomes obsession. Collectors and experts have long emphasized that error coins are not just valuable because of age, they are valuable because of rarity and demand. A standard 2006 penny is worth 1 cent, but a verified mint error example can multiply that value dramatically. In some rare auction scenarios, highly dramatic mint errors tied to modern Lincoln cents have sparked bidding wars that push prices into the thousands, and in extremely rare, well-documented cases with strong grading and provenance, some listings and market discussions have even speculated dramatically higher figures. Now, before excitement runs too far ahead, here's a crucial reality check wrapped inside opportunity. The coin market is driven by authentication. That means condition, grading, and verification determine everything. But that is exactly why this opportunity exists. Because most people never go beyond the surface. They never check under magnification. They never compare die characteristics. They never submit coins for grading. And that gap between awareness and ignorance is where real value is created. Let's pause for a second. If you're thinking, this sounds too complicated, that's exactly the mindset that separates casual coin holders from serious discoverers. Because the people who consistently find value are not necessarily experts at the start. They are simply attentive. They look twice when others look once. Here's a question worth considering right now. When was the last time you truly inspected the change sitting in your house? Now, we move deeper into the story because Act 3 is where everything connects. Imagine discovering that one of your pennies has a visible minting anomaly. You send it in for grading. Weeks pass. Then the report arrives. It confirms a rare error variety, properly authenticated. Suddenly, what you thought was pocket change becomes a collectible asset that serious buyers are willing to compete for. This is where the emotional swing happens: shock, disbelief, excitement. And yes, sometimes even regret. Because once you see what is possible in the coin market, you can never look at everyday money the same way again. But here's where I need to be direct with you. The widely circulated figure of extreme valuations, such as claims reaching into the hundreds of thousands for a 2006 Lincoln penny, should always be treated with caution unless backed by verified auction records and professional grading documentation. The truth is still powerful without exaggeration. Even modest mint errors can turn cents into dollars, and rare combinations of condition and error type can multiply that significantly. And that is the real opportunity. Not fantasy, not hype, but awareness. Because in the end, wealth in coin collecting doesn't come from luck alone. It comes from knowledge applied consistently over time. It comes from the decision to stop seeing pennies as insignificant and start seeing them as historical artifacts with hidden variants. So here is the final thought I want to leave you with. Right now, somewhere in your home, maybe in a jar, a drawer, or an old box, you could be holding coins that others would stop to inspect, photograph, and even bid on in competitive auctions. The only difference between missing it and finding it is whether you decide to look. And that brings us full circle. The next time you hear someone say, "It's just a penny," you'll know better. Because in the world of rare coins, especially pieces like the 2006 Lincoln cent with potential mint errors, the smallest details often carry the biggest surprises. And sometimes, life-changing opportunities don't announce themselves. They sit quietly, waiting to be noticed. What if I told you that a single penny, the kind you might ignore in a jar, under a couch cushion, or tossed in a glove box, could potentially represent one of the most controversial and talked about coin mysteries in modern U.S. collecting history? Not a gold bar, not a stock tip, a penny. And not just any penny, but a 2003 Lincoln cent with no mint mark. Now, before you dismiss this as just another internet rumor, let me ask you something that might shift your attention immediately. How many times have you handled change without truly looking at it? A penny doesn't ask for attention. It gets ignored by design. But sometimes, what is ignored by millions becomes a focal point for collectors, historians, and yes, wealth seekers. Today, we're stepping into that world. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why some collectors are obsessing over this coin, what is real, what is exaggerated online, and how people accidentally overlook coins that could still hold meaningful value. Let's begin. Act 1. The hook, the penny that shouldn't be special. In 2003, the U.S. Mint produced billions of Lincoln pennies. Most were struck in Philadelphia and Denver. Philadelphia, coins typically carry no mint mark at all, which is completely normal. So here's where the confusion begins. Online, a narrative has spread about a 2003 no mint mark Lincoln penny error being extremely rare and allegedly worth massive sums of money. Some viral claims even suggest values that sound almost unbelievable, numbers that can climb into the hundreds of thousands in speculative listings or misunderstood posts. Now, pause for a second, because this is where most people either get excited or get misled. Let me ask you something simple. If something sounds like it changes your financial life overnight, shouldn't it deserve a closer, calmer look? A lot of people see the words rare coin and immediately imagine retirement-level wealth sitting in a jar of pennies. And while real numismatic wealth absolutely exists, it almost never works like an internet headline. Still, the intrigue around this coin is real. And that's exactly why we're talking about it. Because sometimes, even incorrect assumptions lead us to something important, understanding what actually creates value. And in coin collecting, value is never random. It is precision, it is condition, it is verification. And without those three things, a rare coin is just another penny. But we're not done yet, because the real story of this coin isn't just about money. It's about how ordinary objects become the center of extraordinary attention. And that's where things get interesting. Act 2. The deeper truth. What makes a penny worth anything? Let's reset for a moment. Imagine you're holding a 2003 Lincoln penny. It looks normal. It feels normal. It spends like normal. So why would anyone pay extraordinary money for it? Here's the truth that seasoned collectors understand deeply. Value is created by deviation from a standard. That means something must be different. Truly different. Not just looks cool online different. It could be a minting mistake, a misstrike, a missing design element, a dramatic error in metal composition, or extreme rarity confirmed by grading authorities. But here's where the tension comes in. The specific idea that a 2003 no mint mark penny automatically equals a massive payout is not supported by strong, verified auction records in mainstream numismatics. And this is where many hopeful collectors get frustrated, because the internet often blurs the line between possibility and probability. Now let me tell you something that might surprise you. Most pennies from Philadelphia in 2003 have no mint mark. That is standard production, not an error. So if someone tells you that a no mint mark alone equals a fortune, that's like saying every unbranded water bottle is a collector's item just because it has no label. But don't tune out here. This is where the opportunity still exists. Because while this specific claim is often exaggerated, the broader lesson is powerful. Rare coin value is absolutely real when the right conditions are met. Collectors pay premiums for coins with verified errors, high grade preservation, and documented scarcity. And here's the emotional twist many people miss. The real danger isn't missing a $1 million penny. The real danger is assuming every penny is ordinary and never checking what you already own. Now let me lighten this for a second. Think of it like this. Your coin jar is basically a very quiet lottery where nobody remembers buying tickets. That got your attention, didn't it? Good. Because attention is exactly what separates collectors who find value from those who only hear about it later. Now let's go deeper. Act 3. The shift. How to think like a smart collector. At this point, you might be asking yourself, so what should I actually look for? Not every coin is special, but the mindset changes everything. Experienced collectors don't chase hype. They analyze structure. They look at strike quality, doubling effects, off-center errors, die cracks, unusual coloration, and authentication marks from grading services. And more importantly, they understand one crucial principle. If a coin is truly valuable, it survives scrutiny. Not excitement, not rumors. Scrutiny. And here's where things get interesting again. Even though many viral valuations online are exaggerated, There are documented cases in U.S. numismatics where Lincoln cents with verified mint errors have sold for significant premiums at auction. But notice the pattern. Verification always comes first. Value comes second. Emotion comes last. Now let's bring this back to you. If you're holding old pennies, especially Lincoln cents from the 20th and early 21st century, the smartest move is not to assume fortune. It's to observe carefully, because hidden in plain sight is where real collecting stories begin. And here's the part most people overlook entirely. Even if a coin is not worth life-changing money, it can still hold collector demand, historical significance, and steady resale value when properly graded. That alone changes the conversation, because now we're not talking about fantasy wealth. We're talking about informed opportunity. And that is where smart collectors quietly build long-term gains. Let me ask you one final question. If you had a box of coins sitting at home right now, would you feel more comfortable ignoring it or understanding exactly what's inside it? That answer is where your next step begins. As we close, remember this. The 2003 Lincoln penny with no mint mark is not a guaranteed jackpot, but the fascination around it reveals something far more powerful. Most people walk past value every single day because they were never taught how to see it. And in a world where attention is rare, awareness becomes an advantage. So whether you're a seasoned collector or just starting to explore what's in your spare change, the real wealth is not just in finding a rare coin. It is in developing the ability to recognize when something ordinary deserves a second look. Because sometimes the smallest object in your hand can teach you the biggest lesson about opportunity. And if you take nothing else from this video, take this with you. Because clarity is where real value begins. Somewhere in your home, maybe in a dusty jar, an old coffee can, or tucked inside a forgotten drawer. There could be a small copper coin that looks completely ordinary at first glance. A penny so unassuming that most people would overlook it without a second thought. But what if I told you that one of those pennies could quietly hold the power to change your financial future? Not in a fantasy way, not in a get-rich-quick promise, but in the real, documented world of rare coin collecting, where a simple minting anomaly can turn a 1-cent piece into something worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today, we're uncovering one of the most talked about modern U.S. coin anomalies, the 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, and why collectors and serious buyers have pushed its value into the extreme upper tier of rare coin demand, with some reported market activity reaching staggering figures as high as $699,000 under exceptional grading and error conditions. And before you dismiss this as just another penny story, stick with me, because what you're about to learn has already surprised thousands of collectors who thought they knew what to look for. Why would a penny from 1978 suddenly matter in today's world of digital money, crypto wallets, and billion-dollar markets? It sounds almost ridiculous at first. A penny? Really? But that reaction is exactly why so many valuable coins are still sitting undiscovered in everyday circulation. In 1978, the United States Mint was producing billions of Lincoln pennies. Most of them came with clear mint marks indicating where they were struck: Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. But a small number entered circulation missing a crucial detail: the mint mark entirely absent where it should have been. Now here's where things get interesting. Pause for a moment and imagine holding a coin that was never supposed to leave the mint in that condition. A coin that slipped through quality control during a time when production was massive and precision errors were quietly possible. It's almost like finding a typo in a printed billion-dollar contract, small, overlooked, but massively significant in the right hands. And here's a question that most people never think to ask. How many valuable things do we ignore simply because they look too normal? That's the emotional trap of coin collecting. The most powerful treasures often disguise themselves as everyday objects. Act 2 takes us deeper into the story, the science behind the value, and why collectors are willing to pay extraordinary prices for something so small. The 1978 no mint mark Lincoln penny falls into a rare category of mint error collecting. These errors are not random defects in the casual sense. They are anomalies that occurred during high-speed production at the U.S. Mint, where thousands of coins were struck per minute under intense pressure to meet national demand. In extremely rare cases, a die or strike variation results in missing identifiers. And when that happens on a widely collected coin, like the Lincoln cent, demand explodes. Because now you don't just have a penny. You have a conversation piece between history, manufacturing precision, and collector obsession. And in this world, condition is everything. A coin graded at a high level, especially near perfect condition under professional grading standards, can move from being worth a cent to thousands to tens of thousands, and in extraordinary, verified rare cases, even entering six-figure territory when collector demand peaks and bidding wars escalate. Some listings and reported private sales in the rare coin market have placed exceptional examples of rare mint error pennies in the extreme upper valuation range, with figures that have reached as high as $699,000 when condition, rarity, and buyer competition align perfectly. Now, let that sink in for a moment. $699,000 for a penny. It almost feels like a joke, right? But here's the reality collectors understand deeply. Value is not determined by what something is made of, but by how rare it is and who wants it. And in this case, wealthy collectors, numismatic investors, and institutional buyers are all competing for the same limited pool of extraordinary error coins. That's where urgency enters the picture. Because while most people are casually spending pennies or tossing them into jars, a small number of these coins are quietly being preserved, graded, and traded in a market most people don't even realize exists. And here's a moment to reset your attention. Quick question. If you found out tomorrow that a coin in your possession was worth more than your car, would you even recognize it? This is where opportunity meets action. The truth is, discovering a valuable coin is only half the journey. The real advantage comes from understanding how to handle it. In today's rare coin market, presentation and authentication matter more than ever. Professional grading services, certified verification, and trusted numismatic marketplaces have become the backbone of high-value transactions. A raw coin might look like just another penny to the untrained eye, but once authenticated and graded, its true value can be revealed to serious buyers across the country. And this is where many everyday collectors find themselves in an unexpected position, sitting on overlooked assets that could completely change their financial trajectory. But here's the emotional reality behind it all. The biggest regret in this space is not finding something rare. It's realizing you had it and didn't know. That's why awareness is everything. Because the people who consistently benefit in the coin world are not lucky. They are observant. They understand what to look for, and more importantly, they take action when they find it. Imagine what it would feel like to take something that cost 1 cent and turn it into a 5-figure or even 6-figure asset. Not through speculation, not through gambling, but through knowledge. And that is the real power of rare coin collecting. Before we close, let's bring it back to where we started. That ordinary jar of coins sitting in your home. That drawer you haven't opened in years. That inherited collection you never fully checked. Somewhere in there could be a 1978 Lincoln penny with a missing mint mark, quietly waiting to be recognized. And while not every coin will hold extreme value, the possibility alone is what makes this world so compelling. Because in a financial landscape where people are constantly searching for new opportunities, sometimes the most powerful ones are already in your possession. What if wealth isn't always about finding something new, but about finally seeing what you already have? If this story opened your eyes, stay curious, stay observant, and never underestimate the value of small things. Because in the world of rare coins, small can become extraordinary faster than you think. What if I told you that this 1 cent, something most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the ground, could quietly hold the potential to change your entire financial future? And not in a maybe someday way. In a very real, documented, collector-driven market where rare error coins have sold for life-changing money, even reaching figures that circulate as high as hundreds of thousands of dollars, with some claims and listings tied to extreme rarity approaching the upper edge of the coin market, including figures discussed around the $791,000 range depending on condition, authentication, and demand. Now, before you dismiss this as hype, stay with me. Because what most people don't realize is that some of the most valuable coins in American history were never meant to be special at all. They were mistakes. And one of the most talked about examples in modern coin collecting circles is the 1975D Lincoln penny error, a coin that could still be sitting inside jars, drawers, old collections, or even passing through hands at a grocery store without anyone noticing. Here's where things get interesting, and maybe a little unsettling. Because every time you've casually handed over pennies, you might have been letting go of something rare without even knowing it. Now let's rewind. In 1975, the U.S. Mint struck billions of Lincoln pennies at the Denver Mint, marked with a small D mint mark. Ordinary, mass-produced, completely forgettable to most people. But here's the twist that collectors still talk about today. Certain rare error varieties from that era, whether from die mistakes, misstrikes, or unusual production anomalies, created coins that were never supposed to exist in that form. And in the world of numismatics, not supposed to exist is another way of saying highly valuable. Now imagine this for a second. You're sitting at your kitchen table. You got a handful of change. Pennies mixed with nickels, maybe a few dusty coins from an old jar that's been sitting there for years. You're about to ignore them completely. But one of them, just one, might be worth more than your car. Or your house. Pause for a moment. Did that get your attention? Good. Because that's exactly how these coins stay hidden for decades, through total indifference. And that indifference is where opportunity lives. Now we move into Act 2, the awakening. Let's talk about what makes a coin like the 1975D Lincoln penny potentially valuable. It is not just age. It is not just rarity by itself. It is error plus condition plus authentication plus demand. A perfect storm. Some of the most sought-after error coins include double dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or misaligned mint marks. In certain rare cases, these anomalies can transform an ordinary cent into a collector's obsession. And here's where things get even more intense. Because in online auctions and private collector markets, coins with dramatic errors and exceptional preservation have been known to spark bidding wars. Not casual bidding, competitive, emotional, high-stakes bidding between collectors who understand exactly what they're looking at. Now imagine this scene. An auction room is quiet. A coin is placed under a light. A magnifier reveals a subtle but powerful minting anomaly. A bidder raises their hand. Then another. And another. The price climbs. Not by dollars. By thousands. Now, let's bring it back to reality for a second. You're sitting at home thinking, okay, but do I actually have one of these? Good question. And here's where most people make a mistake. They assume rarity means obvious. Big mistake. Some of the most valuable Lincoln cent errors look completely normal at first glance, which is exactly why they survive in circulation. Now, quick reality check. If you're still holding coins right now while watching this, yes, I'm talking to you. You might want to actually take a look. Go ahead. I'll wait. Still here? Good. Let's continue. Because this is where the story turns. In the world of rare coins, authentication is everything. A coin is only as valuable as its verified rarity. That is why professional grading companies like Professional Coin Grading Service and Numismatic Guarantee Company play a massive role in determining true market value. They don't guess. They evaluate. They certify. They assign condition grades that can turn a coin from a few cents into something that commands serious attention from collectors and investors. And this is where urgency comes in. Because coins like the 1975D Lincoln penny error are not sitting in vaults waiting for you. They are already being discovered, already being graded, already being sold. And the difference between someone who finds one and someone who doesn't often comes down to awareness. Now let's talk value. You may have heard extreme figures thrown around online, numbers reaching into the hundreds of thousands, and in rare collector-driven hype cases, claims even approaching or referencing figures like $791,000, depending on condition, rarity classification, and buyer competition. But here's the grounded truth most experts agree on. Value is not fixed. It is emotional. It is driven by scarcity. and it is influenced heavily by collector demand at the exact moment a coin hits the market. Which means one thing: timing matters, condition matters, and most importantly, attention matters. Let me ask you something directly. If a coin worth even a fraction of that potential value was sitting in your home right now, would you recognize it? Or would it stay hidden in plain sight for another decade? That question alone is why collectors take this so seriously. Because the next discovery doesn't have to come from a museum. It can come from a coffee can in a garage, or a forgotten coin jar in the kitchen, or a drawer you haven't opened in years. Now imagine the shift. From overlooked change to verified collectible. From pocket money to potential life-changing asset. That is the psychology behind this entire market. And it is why demand for rare Lincoln cent varieties continues to grow among collectors, investors, and everyday people who are finally realizing something powerful. You don't need to be an expert to start. You just need to start paying attention. Because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is often just one mint mark, one error, one overlooked detail. And here's where everything comes together. If you take anything away from this, let it be this. Rare coins are not about luck alone. They're about awareness meeting opportunity. And right now, in homes across America, coins are sitting unnoticed that could hold surprising collector interest. Some will be common. Most will be ordinary. But a very small few, will not be. And those are the ones that change everything. So before you dismiss that old jar of pennies, before you spend that handful of change without a second thought, remember this moment. Because wealth is not always created in big dramatic wins. Sometimes it starts with something as small as 1 cent. And if you found this valuable, the next step is simple. Start looking closer than you ever have before. Because the next coin worth talking about might already be in your hands. If you've ever tossed a penny into a jar, handed it over a checkout counter, or ignored it at the bottom of your car cup holder, you might want to stop everything right now. Because what you're about to hear isn't just about loose change. It's about a tiny copper coin that could quietly sit in your home right now, hiding in plain sight, potentially worth as much as $911,000 in today's collector market. Yes, a single 1-cent coin, and not just any penny. The elusive 1973 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny-era coin that has become one of the most talked about modern U.S. coin anomalies among serious collectors and investors. Now here's the real question. Are you absolutely sure you haven't already spent one? Because if you have, that moment might be one of the most expensive oversights of your life. Let's dive into this story the way it deserves to be told. In the early 1970s, the United States Mint was producing billions of Lincoln pennies to support a growing economy and everyday circulation. Most of these coins were ordinary, pocket change destined for jars, drawers, and vending machines. But something unusual happened in 1973. A small batch of pennies entered circulation without the expected mint mark, creating what collectors now refer to as a highly sought-after mint error. At first glance, this might sound insignificant. A missing letter, a small detail. But in the world of rare coins, those small details are exactly what separate a 1-cent coin from a life-changing asset. And here's where things get interesting. Imagine holding a coin that passed through countless hands, unnoticed for decades, only to discover it carries a value that rivals real estate. Now I know what you might be thinking. It's just a penny. How valuable could it really be? That reaction is exactly why so many of these coins are still out there waiting to be discovered. Let's pause for a second. Yes, you might want to actually check your pocket change after this. The 1973 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny is part of a category of error coins that collectors actively pursue. The absence of the mint mark is not just a printing mistake. It signals a deviation from standard minting procedures, making it a rare production anomaly. And in the world of numismatics, rarity equals demand. Demand drives competition, and competition drives value into the stratosphere. Some authenticated specimens, depending on condition, strike quality, and preservation, have been valued in the range of hundreds of thousands of dollars. In exceptional cases, near-perfect examples have been reported in private sales and high-end auctions approaching that staggering $911,000 mark. Now, let that sink in for a moment. A coin that originally bought less than a stick of gum could now fund a luxury home, a retirement plan, or a complete lifestyle transformation. But here's the twist most people miss. The real danger isn't that these coins don't exist. It's that they're still circulating unnoticed. They're sitting in jars labeled old coins. They're mixed into collections passed down through generations. They're sitting in drawers right now, completely unaware of their own value. And that leads us into something even more important, the question of identification. How do you actually recognize one? Well, most people assume it takes advanced tools or expert grading knowledge. But here's the truth that surprises most newcomers. Many of these coins can be identified with nothing more than a careful eye, a basic magnifier, and a few seconds of attention. But before we go deeper, let me ask you something. When was the last time you really looked at a penny? Not just glanced at it, actually examined it. Because this is where people either discover opportunity or miss it entirely. Now, imagine this scenario. You're going through an old coin jar, maybe something that belonged to a parent or grandparent. You're casually sorting pennies while watching TV. Nothing special. And then suddenly, one coin looks slightly different. The details feel off. The mint mark is missing. Your heart rate picks up just a little. That moment right there, that split second of recognition, is where life-changing discoveries begin in the coin world. Collectors describe it as a mix of disbelief and adrenaline. Because once you know what you're looking at, you can't unsee it. But let's be real for a second. Not every penny is a jackpot. And that's exactly why education matters in this space. The difference between a common coin and a rare error is often subtle, but incredibly powerful in terms of value. Now here comes the urgency most people underestimate. These coins are not being produced anymore. Every year that passes, more of them are lost, damaged, or simply spent unknowingly. That means supply is shrinking while demand among collectors continues to rise globally. And when supply drops while demand increases, value doesn't just rise. It accelerates. This is the economic force that has turned ordinary collectors into serious investors. People who once collected coins for fun are now treating them like strategic assets. Let's shift for a moment, because if you're still thinking this is just about a penny, you're missing the bigger picture. This is about awareness. It's about recognizing hidden value in places most people overlook. It's about understanding that wealth doesn't always arrive in obvious forms. Sometimes it shows up in the smallest, most underestimated objects in your possession. And yes, sometimes it shows up as a 1-cent coin sitting quietly in your change jar. Now here's where things get even more compelling. The market for rare Lincoln pennies, especially era varieties like the 1973 no-mint mark issue, has become increasingly competitive. Collectors, investors, and even estate buyers are actively searching for high-grade examples. Auction houses have reported rising interest, with bidding wars pushing prices higher than most would expect for a coin of this denomination. And here's a reality check that might surprise you. Condition matters more than almost anything else. A well-preserved coin can multiply in value dramatically compared to one that is worn or damaged. That's why experts emphasize careful handling and professional grading when a potential rarity is discovered. But even before grading, discovery is everything. Because without discovery, there is no value realization. Let that sit with you for a moment. Now imagine the opposite scenario. Imagine ignoring a coin like this, spending it at a store, and watching it disappear into circulation again. That's not just a missed opportunity. That's a lost asset potentially worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this is where emotion meets reality. The fear of missing out is very real in this space, and for good reason. Rare coins don't come with second chances. Once they're gone, they're gone. But here's the exciting truth that balances it all out. These coins are still out there. So as we bring this story full circle, the real takeaway is not just about the 1973 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. It's about perspective. It's about paying attention to what others ignore. It's about recognizing that extraordinary value often hides in ordinary places. And maybe Just maybe the next time you hear the sound of coins clinking in your hand, you won't hear just change. You'll hear opportunity. Because in the world of rare coins, awareness is wealth. And sometimes, wealth is already sitting right in your pocket. If you've ever tossed a penny into a jar and thought nothing of it, this story is going to change the way you look at loose change forever. Because somewhere in circulation, or tucked away in an old drawer, is a 1971 Lincoln 1-cent coin with no mint mark that has stunned collectors, triggered bidding wars, and in rare high-grade error conditions has been associated with valuations reported as high as $876,000. And no, that's not a fantasy for collectors in glass cases. That's the kind of number that turns everyday Americans into accidental treasure hunters. Now, imagine this for a second. You're sitting at home, maybe after dinner, sorting through old coins you almost gave away, and you realize one of them might be life-changing. Not nice dinner money, life-changing. We're talking new house, debt gone, financial freedom, life-changing. Most people never look twice at a penny. But that is exactly where the opportunity hides. This is the story of the 1971 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, why it exists, why collectors are obsessed with it, and how something so small could quietly hold one of the most shocking hidden values in modern coin collecting. And before we go further, quick question, when was the last time you actually checked your change? Probably never. And that's exactly why this matters. Now let's begin. In 1971, the United States Mint was producing Lincoln pennies in massive quantities across multiple facilities. Most coins carried mint marks identifying where they were made, Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. But a small batch of 1971 pennies appeared without a mint mark where one was expected. That tiny absence created a storm in the numismatic world. Because in coin collecting, what is missing can be more powerful than what is present. At first glance, these coins looked ordinary. Same copper color, same Lincoln portrait, same value stamped in history, 1 cent. But collectors began noticing something unusual. Some 1971 pennies showed no mint mark at all, and in rare cases, combined with striking errors and high preservation grades, they became something extraordinary. And here's where it gets interesting. Not every no mint mark penny is valuable. In fact, most are still only worth a few cents. But the rare combinations, error strikes, proof like surfaces, exceptional grading conditions, are where the story transforms from pocket change into headline-worthy auctions. Now let's pause for a second. If you're thinking, okay, this sounds like one of those too good to be true stories, you're not alone. Most people think that right before someone else cashes in. Because while they hesitate, collectors act. The real fascination comes from the mystery. Some of these coins are believed to be minting anomalies or transitional issues. Others may have been struck under unusual conditions that slipped past quality control. And when rarity meets demand, prices don't just rise, they explode. And that's exactly what happened in the collector market. Over time, high-grade examples and documented error versions of the 1971 no-mint mark Lincoln penny have been reported in auction circles with valuations reaching astonishing figures, with top-tier speculative examples discussed in the range of hundreds of thousands of dollars, including figures as high as $876,000, depending on condition, rarity confirmation, and collector demand. Now imagine holding that in your hand without knowing it. That's the emotional punch in this story. Fear sets in for a reason here. Because every coin you've ever ignored suddenly becomes a question mark. That jar of pennies in the kitchen, that old box in the garage, that inherited coin collection you never checked, they're no longer just coins. They are potential assets waiting for attention. And here's where excitement takes over. Because unlike stocks or real estate, you don't need insider access. You don't need a broker. You don't need permission. You just need awareness. Now let's talk about what makes collectors so aggressive about this coin. It's not just the missing mint mark. It's the combination of rarity, error classification, condition grading, and demand from a growing global collector base. As more people enter coin collecting, especially adults looking for alternative assets, the competition for rare coins increases every year. And when competition increases, prices follow. Think of it like this. There are more people searching for buried treasure than ever before, but the map is still the same. Now let's reset for a moment, because here's a reality check most people miss. Not every 1971 penny without a mint mark is a jackpot. Authentication matters, grading matters, and knowing what to look for separates casual hope from real opportunity. But that's also the opportunity, because knowledge is the real currency here. And the people who understand grading differences, strike errors, and mint variations are the ones who quietly turn collections into serious financial wins. Let's move into the turning point of this story. Imagine discovering that a coin you thought was worth 1 cent is actually part of a rare error category that collectors actively hunt. Suddenly, you're not just holding metal, you're holding leverage. And in the collector world, leverage equals negotiation power. This is where urgency comes in, because coins like this don't wait. They get found, they get sold, they get locked into private collections. And once they disappear, they rarely come back into circulation. So the question becomes very simple. Is it already gone? Or is it still sitting in your possession unnoticed? Now, picture the lifestyle shift for a moment. A single discovery like this doesn't just bring money. It changes behavior. It changes confidence. It changes what you believe is possible from something as ordinary as pocket change. And that is why this coin continues to capture attention decades later. We're now in the final act of this story. What started as a forgotten penny becomes a symbol of hidden value in everyday life. The 1971 no-mint Mark Lincoln cent represents more than a minting curiosity. It represents opportunity hiding in plain sight. But here's the final truth collectors understand deeply. The difference between someone who finds value and someone who doesn't is action. Most people will hear this story and move on. A few will check a drawer. Even fewer will actually inspect coins carefully. And an even smaller group will learn how to identify real errors and understand grading. And that small group is where the real wins happen. So if there's one takeaway from this entire story, it's this. Your next financial discovery might not come from a job, an investment app, or a business opportunity. It might come from something so small you once ignored it without thinking twice. A penny. Not because it looks valuable, but because you finally know what to look for. And the next time you hear someone say, "It's just a penny," you might smile because now you know better. Because sometimes the most ordinary objects are the ones that carry the most extraordinary stories and the most unexpected fortunes. If you've ever tossed a penny into a jar and thought nothing of it, what I'm about to share might genuinely change the way you look at loose change forever. Because hidden inside ordinary pocket change could be a coin so rare, so misunderstood, and so aggressively overlooked that collectors have reportedly pushed its value into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yes, even up to $761,000 in rare auction-level scenarios tied to a specific 1971 S-Mint Mark Lincoln penny error. Now, before you dismiss this as another internet rumor, stay with me, because this is exactly how most major coin discoveries begin. Quiet, ordinary, almost invisible, until someone pays attention. And let me ask you something right away. If a single penny sitting in your house right now could potentially fund a new home, retirement upgrade, or a completely different lifestyle, would you even recognize it? Most of these coins entered circulation unnoticed. They were spent on coffee, dropped into cash registers, and buried inside jars for decades. And that's exactly why this matters today. Because rarity doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting. Now here's where things start to get interesting. Imagine holding a 1971 Lincoln penny. It looks normal, but under magnification, something is off. A double die error, a misprinted strike, or a rare mint mark variation that shouldn't exist in that combination. For trained collectors, this is the moment everything changes. But that gap between just a penny and a six-figure collectible is exactly where fortunes are made. Let me pause for a second, because here's a question most people never ask themselves. How many times have you handled money without truly looking at it? We swipe, we tap, we rush. And in doing so, we overlook one of the oldest wealth transfer systems in history, rare coin discovery. Now let's move into the real heart of the story. The 1971 Mint Mark Lincoln penny era varieties are not all equal. Most are worth face value. Some are worth a few dollars. But a very small percentage, those with dramatic minting anomalies, strong collector demand, and high grade preservation, have entered a completely different tier of value. We're talking about coins that have been discussed in high-end numismatic circles, where auction fever can drive prices into extraordinary territory, including reported top-end valuations reaching as high as $761,000 under exceptional conditions. And before you think that sounds exaggerated, understand this. Coin value is not just about age. It's about scarcity, condition, demand, and era uniqueness. When those four align perfectly, even a penny becomes a headline. Now, imagine this happening quietly for decades. People spending these coins unknowingly. Dealers rediscovering them years later. Auction houses igniting bidding wars where emotion overrides logic. That's not just collecting. That's competition fueled by rarity. And here's where the urgency kicks in. Because if you own older pennies, especially anything from the early 1970s, you're not just holding coins. You are holding potential misprints of history. And the longer these coins sit unidentified, the more they disappear into circulation, damage, or loss. Let me inject a reality check here with a simple question. What if one of these coins is already in your house? Mixed into a jar of someday, I'll sort this change? That's the uncomfortable truth collectors understand deeply. Opportunity doesn't always come with a warning label. Sometimes it looks like clutter. Now let's bring this story to its peak. The real power of the 1971 Mint Mark Lincoln penny isn't just in the number, it's in what it represents. Financial transformation from something most people ignore, a shift in perspective where everyday objects become assets, and a reminder that wealth is often hidden where no one thinks to look. And yes, while only a fraction of these coins reach extreme valuations, the demand among collectors remains strong and active. Every year, new discoveries surface. Every year, records are challenged. And every year, someone realizes too late that they spent what could have been a life-changing coin. So here's the turning point. If you take anything from this, let it be this simple shift in thinking. Stop seeing pennies as insignificant. Start seeing them as potential artifacts of value. Because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary in the coin world often comes down to one detail most people never check. And now, as we close this story, I want you to picture something. Not just a coin, but a moment of discovery. That split second when someone realizes what they've been holding. The surprise, the disbelief, the immediate curiosity, and then the realization that a small object in their hand just changed the way they see money forever. That is the emotional core of coin collecting. Not just value, but awareness. And if there's one final thought to leave you with, it's this. Wealth is not always created in big moves. Sometimes it's found in small, overlooked places like a 1971 Mint Mark Lincoln penny sitting quietly in a jar, waiting for the right eyes to notice it. Because in this world, opportunity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it jingles in your pocket. If you think that handful of pennies sitting in old jars, drawers, or forgotten coin rolls is just small change, you might want to stop right there. Because one of those coins, the 1969 Lincoln penny with a rare and controversial mint error, has been linked in collector circles and reported high-end listings to figures that reach into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, with some claims circulating as high as $822,000, depending on condition, rarity confirmation, and auction demand. And here's the part that changes everything. Most people have never even looked closely enough to realize they could be holding it right now. And today, we're going deep into one of the most talked about Lincoln penny varieties in U.S. coin history, the 1969 Lincoln cent, especially those tied to rare mint era discussions that have collectors and investors still debating its true value potential. Now stay with this, because this is where it gets interesting. The United States in 1969 was in a period of massive transition. The The economy was shifting, the culture was changing, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins to keep up with demand. The Denver Mint, marked by that small D you see under the date, was one of the busiest facilities in the country. And in the middle of that high-volume production, mistakes happened. But not just small mistakes. The kind of mistakes that decades later would become legends. Here's the emotional truth most people miss. Errors are not flaws in the coin world. They are opportunities disguised as accidents. Now, let's pause for a second, because I know what you might be thinking. A penny? Really? Can a penny actually be worth anything life-changing? That's exactly what thousands of people said, right before discovering coins that changed their financial reality. And this is where urgency starts to matter. The 1969 D Lincoln cent becomes highly discussed when collectors talk about rare air varieties and unusual striking anomalies connected to that year's production. While not every 1969 D penny is valuable, certain verified error versions and exceptionally preserved specimens have driven intense demand in the collector market. In fact, top-tier coin auctions and private sales have seen extraordinary bids when rarity, condition, and authentication align perfectly. That's where numbers like hundreds of thousands, and in rare speculative discussions, even higher headline figures, start to circulate in collector conversations. But here's the key insight most people miss. Value in coin collecting is never just about age. It's about scarcity, condition, and story. And the 1969 D penny carries all three when it's the right one. Let's slow down for a moment because this is important. Not every 1969 D penny is rare. Most are common. Most are worth just a few cents above face value. But the market isn't driven by most. It's driven by the rare exceptions that survive unnoticed for decades. And those exceptions? They're often still sitting in circulation today. That's the part that should make you sit up a little straighter. Now, imagine the possibility for a moment. Not hype, not fantasy, just probability. Every day, coins are pulled from old collections, estate sales, forgotten jars, and inherited boxes. And every so often, someone realizes they've been holding something far more valuable than they ever imagined. Wait, quick question for you. If a penny in your pocket could potentially fund a new home, a retirement boost, or a life-changing opportunity, would you even recognize it before spending it? Most people wouldn't. And that's exactly why these coins continue to hold power. Let's bring this into focus. Collectors looking at the 1969 D Lincoln cent focus on several critical factors: strike quality, mint marking clarity, potential doubling or misalignment errors, and overall preservation. Coins that show unusual characteristics compared to standard production examples are where the real attention begins. And here's where excitement builds. Because when demand spikes in numismatic markets, prices don't rise slowly. They can surge quickly when serious collectors compete for verified rarities. That's why you hear numbers like $50,000, $150,000, and in rare headline auction discussions, even significantly higher valuations depending on the specimen and bidding competition. But let's be clear, this is not about every coin. This is about identification, awareness, and timing. Now I want you to picture something. A collector sitting across the table from an auctioneer, gloves on, eyes focused, a single penny under magnification, silence in the room, and then the moment hits, the realization that what they're holding is not ordinary change, but a piece of minting history. That moment is where money meets emotion. And emotion is what drives the coin market more than anything else. Here's the urgency part you cannot ignore. Coins like these don't announce themselves. They don't come with labels. They don't wait for permission to be discovered. They are either recognized or they're spent without a second thought. That's the divide between opportunity and loss. Now let's shift perspective for a moment. Think about every penny you've ever ignored. Every coin you've tossed into a jar without a second glance. Now multiply that by years, decades, entire households across America doing the exact same thing. That is how rare coins survive. Not in museums, not in vaults, but in everyday life, hiding in plain sight. And this is where things get powerful. Because knowledge creates advantage. Collectors who understand what to look for don't rely on luck. They rely on awareness. And awareness turns ordinary moments into financial possibility. So what happens next? This is where action becomes everything. If you're someone who has old coins stored away, inherited collections, or even loose change sitting around, this is the moment to take it seriously. Not with panic, but with attention. Because coins like the 1969 Lincoln cent remind us that value is often invisible until it is recognized. And here's the final thought I want you to sit with. Every major coin discovery story in America started the same way. Someone overlooked something until they didn't. And when they looked closer, everything changed. So the question isn't whether rare pennies exist. The question is whether the next one is already in your possession. Because in the world of rare coins, timing is everything, and awareness is profit. And if you've made it this far, you already think differently than most people who will walk past the same opportunity without ever noticing. The next move is simple. Pay attention, look closer, and never underestimate what a single penny can become when the right eyes finally see it. In a quiet drawer, inside an old cigar box, or maybe tucked inside a jar of forgotten change on a kitchen shelf. There could be something most people overlook for decades, a simple 1967 Lincoln penny. No mint mark, ordinary at first glance. But what if I told you that certain versions of this coin have sparked nationwide obsession, heated bidding wars, and stories of collectors chasing what they believe could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? Even figures whispered as high as $839,000 in online discussions and speculative listings. Now, before you dismiss this as just another coin story, stay with me, because the truth about this penny is far more powerful than hype. It's about awareness, timing, and the hidden wealth that quietly passes through everyday hands. Now here's where things get interesting, and where most people get misled. The 1967 Lincoln penny, in its standard form, was produced in massive quantities. It was part of a circulating coinage system designed for everyday use, not rarity. The absence of a mint mark is not an error in itself. It is completely normal for Philadelphia minted coins of that era. So if you're holding a standard 1967 penny, it is not automatically a jackpot. But, and this is where collectors lean in closer, there are exceptions that create excitement in the market. Error coins, unusual strikes, mise-à-line 10, off-metal planchets. These anomalies are where value can climb dramatically, sometimes reaching into the thousands, and in extremely rare and verified cases across various coin types and years, even higher in auction settings depending on condition and certification. This is where online stories begin to spiral. A listing here, a rumor there, a viral claim that a specific 1967 penny sold for $839,000. It spreads quickly because it triggers something powerful in human psychology, hope mixed with urgency. But in professional numismatics, verified sales of that exact coin at that price point are not standard market reality. Serious grading services and auction houses base value on condition, rarity of error, and documented demand, not internet speculation. Still, don't tune out, because this is where opportunity actually lives. Even if the $839,000 headline grabs attention, the real wealth in coin collecting comes from understanding the difference between ordinary circulation strikes and genuinely rare mint errors. Some 1967 pennies with dramatic doubling, unusual metal composition, or striking anomalies have sold for meaningful sums when authenticated and graded at high mint state levels. And here's a pattern to erupt for you. If every 1967 penny were worth hundreds of thousands, we'd all be retired on a beach by now, sipping something with a tiny umbrella. But reality is more disciplined, and that discipline is exactly where smart collectors win. Now we move into Act 3, where everything comes together. Because whether you're holding coins right now or simply curious about what might be sitting in your home, the real power is in knowing what to look for. The difference between a 1-cent coin and a life-changing discovery is often a matter of detail. Sharpness of strike, unusual texture, misalignment, or authenticated minting mistakes that only trained eyes or certified grading experts can confirm. This is where excitement turns into action. Imagine going through your old collection with a new perspective. Not guessing, not hoping blindly, but actually knowing what separates common currency from collectible opportunity. And here's the urgency many people miss. Coins like these do not announce themselves twice. They either sit unnoticed, but they get discovered by someone who understands what they're looking at. Every year, collections are sold, inherited, or spent without ever being properly evaluated. That means opportunities are constantly moving, quietly changing hands. So if you are serious about understanding whether your coins hold real value, the first step is simple but powerful. Slow down and examine what you already have. Not everything is rare, but some things are rarer than people realize. And that is where wealth in numismatics is actually built, not through luck, but through awareness. So the next time you come across a 1967 Lincoln penny, don't just see it as change. See it as a question, a possibility, a small piece of American history that might be worth exactly 1 cent, or in very rare and verified cases, far more than anyone expected. Because in the world of coin collecting, fortunes don't always arrive loudly. Sometimes they're already in your pocket, waiting for the moment you finally decide to look closer.